Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
What's up?
Nothing much. I woke up for this, though it's like middle of the day.
What time is it?
12:30.
Cool. So, Asha, when we reached out to you, what did you think this was going to be about?
I think this is such a great idea. I don't know why you want to speak to me, but I think like I love podcasts. I listen to them at least like 2 hours a day, which is kind of depressing. But like, yeah, being a podcast pro, I think this is a great
Okay, if
idea.
you had to interview yourself, why would you do it? I mean, put yourself in our shoes. If we had to invite you, like, why do you think we'd want to speak to you? Because you said you didn't really understand why we wanted to invite you first. So yeah.
Okay, that's a joke. But I'll tell you. I think I'm very relatable and I'm not like super successful and I'm a little ambitious, wanting to go to Oxford or like building a startup at the age that I did. So just to give people like motivation that like a very normal person with limited resources can do it.
Asha says that she's relatable while getting a double scholarship at Oxford and being like, yeah, it's no big deal. Tell this one. Anybody can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
Exactly. If I can do it,
It's a
anybody
double
can do it.
scholarship.
Two different funders. But yeah, I think I talk a lot about my story on LinkedIn also because I think it's important to share, it's like very simple step. I used to think scholarships go to people who have contacts with the foundation. I really thought that till I got one. I thought it's like a black box.
What was the process like for you of getting the Oxford scholarship? And or rather, like, was there a reason why you chose Oxford? Had you applied to other places?
Yeah, no, I had only applied to Oxford. It was not like I had MBA. I wanted to do an MBA since a long time. I decided I wanted to do an MBA like 3 months or 4 months before applying to Oxford. It was Oxford because I had like a intern who was doing the MBA there, and I really liked like the way she approached the problems that like what I was going through and the advice she gave me. I thought it was like a good mix of like business and impact, and she really believed that we should go the for-profit route and like business can be a tool for good, which I wasn't really seeing that much of. I was mostly talking to people who were encouraging me to take the non-profit route because I was doing Gandhi Fellowship, and Gandhi Fellowship is an NGO, and people there generally tend to think that way. Or like my dad and like people in business who are very encouraging to go build a fashion brand, which is purely focused on taking advantage of like sustainability, but not so much impact. But like Gayatri, who did the Oxford MBA, she had like a good intersection. So that's how I knew about Oxford. I didn't really research that much about other schools. It just like kept reinforcing. And then I met a lot of people who did the Oxford MBA, just like for conferences, or it was like a very impact focused business education. So yeah,
I remember the year that Asha was applying to Oxford. I think it was 2019 or was it 2020?
2019 and yeah, 2020.
Like, as someone who sort of has MBA application timelines memorized in the back of their head because I don't know why, but I used to writing her essays and giving the exams. She was doing it like in December for an application that was due Jan, and we were discussing her essays. And I kept thinking, Asha, how are you gonna do this with such little time? I would have wanted to start like a year before if I have to
Yeah.
like get application in. And then she did it. And then she got in and then she got two scholarships. And I was like, what?
Yeah, but I'm so glad I didn't go that year. I didn't get scholarships that year. And honestly, my I got into the MBA, but I was not ready to do an MBA. I hardly knew what it was. It was more like I didn't want to do Swara then, and it was just not growing. And I felt like I was the bottleneck because investors were coming and like we got a lot of traction at that time. And investors were coming and approaching us and things like that. It had grown to a point where I didn't know what to do next. And I had like people who were on a payroll, and then I was like, okay, the next thing is to hire more people, and I was just not ready for it. So I applied because I just didn't want to do Swara and I didn't know what else to do with my life, and this seemed like a good investment of time. But I thankfully I didn't get scholarship that year because yeah, because I was just not ready and it was so obvious. So then I deferred it. And then, like, 1 year I worked on Swara and I also researched other schools that 1 year. And then consciously ruled out applying to other schools. So that was good. And also, I was just more prepared for the scholarships. I was so confident. I was like, yeah, if I get it, I'll come. Otherwise, like, I'm very happy with where I am. Because by that time, I was like, sure, I was going even better. And I think, like, COVID kind of gave me confidence, whereas for everyone else, it was not. Yeah. And during that time, at one point, I was managing 15 people. So I was like, okay, like, they were not on a payroll, but like, I felt confident that I could manage people. But I'm happy that I didn't get it that year. And then, like, I got it.
Why we're interviewing you, because your general answers are something that's supposed to be on a podcast. That's why
Oh,
that's our
oh,
answer.
oh, 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 oh. But one thing I can say, so many like girls from like Kerala or like with my profile has reached out to me just to know, like, I'm thinking about it. Like, what do you think? And like I can be like, yeah, like, you should totally do it. Like, I did it.
What we're trying to do here, right, is uncover insights from people's lives that they themselves might not know about because they've never really gone into detail about their own journeys. So every time we want to become something or achieve something in life, right, we always look at these like role models. We try to emulate what they did. And
Yeah.
in bits and pieces over the years, that sort of adds up until we reach where we are today, right? And
Okay.
we think you've reached a really, really interesting place. And this is something that I had like experienced firsthand when me and you had like that long conversation when I was quitting my last company, right?
Yeah.
Where I felt like me and you in particular learned in different directions, right? Where you started with entrepreneurship and then you stuck to it for a very long time, and then you went to
Yeah.
B school, and like your thought process was going, like, if I were to put it that way, you started in chaos that comes with
Mm.
entrepreneurship, the lack of stability, like where you have to create your own control over your circumstances, towards more order
Mm.
and towards like more well-defined paths, right? So Oxford,
Yeah.
Antler, so on and so forth. Whereas for me, it's
Mm.
always been like, okay, do the textbook thing, engineering, pre-MBA job, MBA, post-MBA job, and then we'll think about what we want to do, right? We'll go work at a startup and become an operator so that we learn how startups work, and then it might be the right time to start your own company or some shit like that. So either way, right? Like it's like I took away a lot from your story. So our objective from calling you today is to dig deep into what is replicable about what you did, right? um, and just to sort of unearth the, okay, it's like what Steve Jobs says, right? Like connecting the dots backwards. We want to see what that picture
Yeah.
looks like. We know what all the, we might find out what all the dots are, right? And as we go
Yeah.
through it, we want to take out the insights that emerge so that they're useful to anybody that wants to do the same things as you do,
Yeah.
right? Somebody who has
Yeah.
similar dreams, somebody that wants to, that wonders if it's even possible to have a job in impact and be an entrepreneur and get an MBA, right?
And I think to add to what Laksh is saying, the idea is to
Mm.
create relatable role models, because whenever we think of role models, the term by definition is you put people on a pedestal and you think that they're so good that they have certain innate attributes
Yeah.
that you can never have. They have, and I really
Yeah.
don't buy into the concept of natural talent or gifts that are given to you when you're born to
Yeah.
achieve something. Role models, the way that they're described
Yeah.
in society, are people who have those things. When you want to be a sports star, you want to look at Cristiano Ronaldo. People around us do a lot of inspiring things, but those stories are not uncovered. And those stories create role
Yeah.
models that are replicable and that help you
Yeah.
get to where you want to get to. That's one thing. The second part is when you inspire somebody through your own story, you feel like your story is more valuable to you. When you set yourself as an
Yeah.
example, you feel more inspired about your own journey. Because I don't,
Yeah.
until you have this conversation, until you put that lens on your story, you feel like, yeah, I'm doing something that's probably not that valuable to anyone else beyond myself. But it is probably valuable to so many other
Yeah.
people who want to be like you. And that's when you feel like, oh, I am part of something bigger than just myself. And that's when you're inspired to take more action. And I feel you do it, and then
Yeah.
somebody else emulates Asha Scaria and does it. And then their story can again be an example to somebody else. And you create this self fulfilling prophecy of like everybody inspiring everyone else. And I feel like that feeling in itself, or that, like, if you can create that cycle of inspiration amongst everyone, it creates a world where people dream bigger, they are more unhinged, and they do things that haven't been done in status quo. And I honestly think that's a pretty cool world.
Thank you so much for sharing, guys. I think it's super inspiring. Ronald did give me a bit of context before the call, but it's really nice to hear it from both of you. And Laksh, the conversation we had when we spoke last. Yeah, that is super inspiring for me as well. I haven't gotten anything figured out, so it's like a journey of like learning, and I learned from you as well. I learned a lot of things, but just that, like, oh, it's nice to know that everybody's on a journey. Like, even if you, yeah, had it all sorted and did it by the books, you're still in the same place as me of like figuring out how to, yeah, make my life most valuable. And I guess that's this question you were also asking, this, the startup you were working at. Yeah,
All right, Asha, like you grew up in Kerala, right? Like you were born and raised there,
yeah.
and then you went to Xavier's. Like, what did you imagine yourself doing after college when you first went to Xavier's?
Not much. I actually, before going to Xavier's, I did 2 years of entrance coaching for law. So 11th and 12th, I did law, like did coaching for law. Then like during, like at the end of it, I realized I don't want to do law. Then for 2 months, I did coaching for engineering. And then I gave all the exams, but it was not like great marks. I even like went and gave the college exam for Ramaya in Bangalore, and like random exams for engineering, because then that year that summer I realized I want to do engineering, but then my marks came and they were like really good. And then people are like, have you ever considered like doing bachelor's? And then I was like, what? That is like for stupid people. I
That's
was
a
so
stupid
naive.
thing.
Yeah, I literally did not. I didn't read. I did read a lot of fiction. I read like a very little non-fiction books, but like newspapers, general knowledge, what's going on in the world. No, they did. It was more like if someone I thought was like cool said something, then I would like ask questions and find out what it was about. So when people told me about bachelors, and like I started researching like what bachelor's, BSc, BA, and what are the subjects offered, what does it mean and stuff. And then I realized like maybe I should do like economics a bit, because I did a few classes of economics in school and I liked it. So I applied for economics in Stephens and BSc physics in Xavier's. And then I got like interviews for both. I did physics, maths, statistics, and I wanted to major in physics, but like it was, the classes were very low quality. It was so like I didn't um I didn't like it at all. The faculty was not engaging. Statistics was more, yeah, I learned more, I guess. I liked it more. And then I just decided to major in that. But and then I started looking at like what my seniors were doing after statistics, and all of them were doing the same thing I was doing, getting drunk, being very unhappy with like their life. And I was like, I don't want to be in Bombay. So I knew I want to do impact. Like I want to work in like social impact, and like nobody I was around really was an impact at all. Like all my friends were going to most of my friends were going to EY for consulting like boss. What is impact? Like, do I want to work in like, yeah, education or like women empowerment or livelihoods, anything? So I wanted a pretty broad approach, and Gandhi Fellowship had like a pretty broad approach to impact.
Which, so just stepping back there, where did that desire to do impact come from? Like, was it something you'd always dreamed of, or like some, like, is it something you
No.
realized during college? Like, how did you come to that conclusion?
I started drinking a lot like when I went to Bombay, and like it was so new and stuff, and like everyone was doing it, but mine was very like trying to run away from something. I just didn't understand like how miserable that city was. There were so many homeless people, and like I was just faced with, yeah, just the reality of the world, I guess. And Kerala is not like that. Like you don't really encounter people, yeah, who are homeless. And I come from a very small town, and I grew up in a very privileged bubble. So Bombay kind of like opened my eyes to how things were, and I wanted to, yeah, do something to change that, but I don't know where to start. In retrospect, I've thought about it a lot. Like, impact was really like nowhere in my life. Nobody was working in NGOs or like in impact. When I was young, in like Sunday school, they asked us to write like when we were 15 what we wanted to do with our life, and like I wrote because they asked us to write for 2 hours. So I wrote a lot, and then I submitted it, and it was like super random. Like nuns came to like recruit me to join the church because they're like, she wants to work in like, helping people. So like that's what we do. And then my parents were like, Asha, joining the church. It's like a big joke. They came in a jeep to like recruit. I wrote that I want to grow up and like help people and make the world a better place and stuff. And then like they were like, yeah, that's what nuns do. And like there's no other job you can have other than being a nun to do that. I think like the essay was more about they were trying to recruit people to join. I didn't understand that. They were just like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I guess they were like looking for engineers, doctors, that kind of answers. Or like if someone didn't know, then they should join the church. I don't know how they judged, but this is what I wrote. And yeah, I grew up very like Christian and yeah, doing a bit of like, yeah. I think everyone does this, right? Haven't you guys like gone and like taught kids and when you were young in school?
I got my first taste of this while working with my dad's NGO in college. But even there,
Hmm.
like, I played more of a facilitator role. Like, I haven't done the actual classroom teaching experience.
A little bit of
Never.
it. When I was in 11th and 12th grade, I used to go to this NGO that used to teach kids how to use a computer. That was an interesting experience because it was in a part of Calcutta that was quite underprivileged.
Yeah,
I used to go there to teach them how to use pretty basic, how to use a computer, how to open files, folders, how to use the
yeah,
internet. It felt so enriching because
yeah.
every day, like, be it a 12th grader not having that much knowledge about anything, not thinking like they can teach somebody something.
Yeah,
I went and taught these kids how to open the internet and search something on Google, and they felt like it was magical.
it's so nice, right? I used to do things like that in school. My mom used to yeah, go to these shelter homes and stuff near our house, and we used to go like almost every week. But it was, yeah, it just felt good, and yeah, my house was way better than in Bombay. That's also why I was like, it can be better, you know. It doesn't have to be like this.
It seemed
So,
like there was a constant like contrast between the life that you had in Bombay during college and the life that you had in Kerala growing up. And you saw two different lives, and you thought that the Bombay life doesn't have to be the way it is. It can sort of be fixed or improved, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting.
exactly.
So that essay that you wrote, was that your first answer to somebody asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I don't think anyone asked me this. Honestly, no one asked me this. The only decision to make was in 11th, like, do you want to take science or what is the other one? Science or maths? No, commerce. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I was like science. Yeah, I just made decisions only when I had to make it. There was also, I think it comes privileged, definitely. Like my parents didn't expect me to bring home any money. Second, like privilege, but also being a girl. I think I realized like sexism and patriarchy has been my biggest strength because like it just allowed me gave me a lot of freedom.
You are the
Yeah,
hero of this story,
the hero's
right?
journey.
Exactly, like the hero's journey. So you
Yeah,
begin in Kerala, right, where life is great. You're in a kind of like a bubble, and you haven't seen the evils out there in the world that
yeah,
are caused by economic inequality and things like that, right?
yeah,
So, and then your first call to adventure arrives, which is
yeah.
what do we what do we think your call to adventure is? Is it the essay you had to write in church, or is it actually going to Bombay and like
Going to Bombay. That essay was a joke. And they still like say it in my family like,
Do
all
you
the
think that
time.
essay was a joke? Because that was the first time that you actually articulated what you wanted to be when
That's
you grow
true.
up. Because you said nobody asked you that question very often.
Nobody has asked me that question, I think, like in my memory. And that essay was the first time someone asked and put me in a place, and we couldn't talk. It was in church. They wanted us to write it inside church, 2 hours, nobody talking, like around 2 hours, long time. Because initially I was like, I'm going to write something. But then there was so much time I had to like write. I also think that's the first time I wrote about like my feelings, like journaling, but not like, um, yeah, I used to journal, but not about like such deep questions. More like, oh, today I did this, and it was not that deep. But this was like a deep question I was answering. And even today, I think like writing allows me to like explore myself, and it's it's how I learn through writing, through talking, but I think more through writing, like deep uh, lessons, things I want to internalize. I have to do it by writing it. So yeah, it was my introduction to like what I wanted to do and to writing. And yeah, it's actually a big moment. I meant it's a joke, as in like my family keeps joking because I'm the last person who would be admitted into church as a nun. Do you see like what I wear or like what I do? Like no way. But yeah, that's the
you would
joke.
have been Sister Asha? Or would you have to change your
Yeah.
name? Would it have to become something like Margaret or
No, no. Asha is fine in Kerala. Asha
so,
is fine.
were you raised Catholic or
I was raised Catholic,
okay, so
very
you
Catholic.
are baptized, you've gone to Sunday school, passed it, you have the
Yeah,
certificate, everything. Okay.
yeah, I have a certificate.
So I have
Yeah,
a friend
raised
who
weird.
like he's a staunch atheist and he's raised like
Mm,
he's Catholic, and he
mm,
had to get married to this girl,
mm.
and the girl's not Catholic, but the girl's
Mm.
mother is Catholic, right? So
Okay.
when they were about to get married, the girl's mother said, look, just do it right with like a
Yeah.
priest and everything. And so he was like, shit, I gotta go get baptized now. I have to pass Sunday school for it, right? And then he
Ah.
went to the priest, and this priest is like, where have you been for 26 years? I haven't seen your face. He's like, look, I don't give a shit. I have 6 weeks. Get me through this, right? And
Yeah.
then he studied his ass off and made it. And then they had like
Yeah.
a proper church wedding. So it was fun.
Yeah. He should have just gone to church. This is what we got told all the time. It's like, I can't go to church anymore. I have to stop. And then my mom was like, yeah, you can't get married till you get like 10th certificate. Yeah, your friend should have gone. Dude, in my memory, it felt like 2 hours, but I don't know how much time it was. It was a long, long time.
Cool. So going to Bombay and then realizing that this is what the world actually looks like, right? Where
Mm,
there is a lot of inequality, distribution injustices, things like that, that a lot of people are working to improve, right, through a bunch of different avenues. Let's say that that was your call, that you wanted to get into this field, right? Did you ever feel like you wanted to refuse that call, like, and not do it and do something else?
I did get another job in like a event management company, and it was a startup, and they were like, it was exactly the life I was living in Bombay, very young, everybody like happening, and they had like an annual festival in like some island. Like the pitch was very strong. I was like, I don't want to keep doing this with my life. Like it has to mean more than this. Did I consider it? I obviously did because that's the only path I knew. Like I said, I didn't have anyone in my family or friend circle who was an impact. My mom has like a grand aunt who went to who wanted to do social service, so she joined the church and became a nun. And then she was like, "This is like so limiting, and I can't do anything to help. It's just praying all the
Yeah.
time." And she is still she follows some other discipline now, but basically she's not part of the church, but she does social work. That is so extreme for me, and that's the only person I knew who did social work. She's very kind, very sweet. And now, like now, I'm back in touch with her because I've also become extreme social worker, and we work together and stuff like sometimes. But at that time, she's the only person I knew, which was not even like a close person who did impact, and that was like yeah. So I never thought about impact as a career choice ever. So definitely, I did think about the traditional routes. That's what was available, and Gandhi Fellowship was just crazy. So then a lot of people didn't understand. Like nobody in my circle understood why I would do that or choose that. And in fact, I also didn't understand it too much. That's why I did Gandhi Fellowship. If I knew what impact I wanted to create, I wouldn't have joined such a broad program. It's like entrepreneurship in villages, and it's a very
What
broad
is
picture.
what is the
Yeah.
Gandhi Fellowship? Like, tell us more about it. Like, what's the program?
It's a 2 year program. So they came to pitch in St. Xavier's, pitch this. It's 2 years. You go and live in a rural area and you're in charge of 4 to 5 schools. And your role there is kind of like to act as a consultant to the leadership of the school and to develop these students. And it could be like Gandhi Fellowship operates in different villages, which are very underdeveloped across India, mostly northern India. And in these 2 years, you have to improve the learning levels of students, but also you have to engage with the community and solve any problems that could relate to a child not performing well in school. And all the problems in the village is very directly related to how the students behave, and the school is kind of the only point of contact for the government with that village. So a lot of things happen through the school, and they also pitched that every semester, it's a 4 semester program, and every semester you have 1 month where you go and live in the village without any telephone, without any money, and you have to like um, find your own way and find your own food and shelter and all that stuff. So that sounded like an adventure, but for impact. So adventure with a good cause, not to be on TV. So I was like, oh, that is so cool. It's like a reality show, but like without it being a reality show. So I thought that was super cool to live without a phone, without uh, food, and like to find my way and to see like if I'll survive. But obviously with like they will provide protection and
Yeah.
everything. So I thought that was really cool. So I was 20 years old. I was very just excited to like do something meaningful with my life, but I honestly did not have like much of an idea what Gandhi Fellowship was. Do you want me to tell what the actual experience
I
was?
just want to say you're 21 years old. You've lived 3 years in probably the most happening city in Bombay. And
Mm,
then you decide to take up the Gandhi Fellowship, which, like, from what you just described, feels like you're being picked up and being put in a remote village and being asked to figure out how to run schools in that remote village, which is deeply affected by like the cultural traditions of that place. So it's sort of like a 180-degree like turn from like what your life was in Bombay, right?
very true. It was a 180-degree turn, and that's what I wanted.
That's the baffling part to me, right? Because honestly, like, I feel like it just sounds incredibly scary. Not because something will happen to you, but because all of the creature comforts that you've gotten so used to are suddenly poof gone. And then you might go to this place where, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't get too much oversight or mentorship or direct help when it comes to
No,
influencing the school to do what you think it should do. And in your case, like, just out of curiosity, were you stationed in North India somewhere, or like,
yeah.
so how good was your Hindi at the time? Like, did that ever become an issue as well?
I was what placed in Dungarpur. It's like a tribal. district in Rajasthan, border of Rajasthan, Gujarat. Very tribal, like people still bathe in the open. Like there are electricity lines in most villages, but people don't have enough money for electricity. So probably like in the villages I stayed in, like yeah, I would pick the house that has electricity because I'm so cool and calculated to live for the village immersion. But mostly that was the only house in the vicinity which would have electricity in spite of having electric lines there. So very rural, tribal. Most people in the villages spoke a tribal language called Wagdi, and most of the schools, the students that I was in charge of, the students also spoke that. So my Hindi was as good as their Hindi. So it was kind of like a good position to be in, I think. Um, because like the other fellows all knew really uh, spoke really good Hindi, but they were also struggling to do anything. So I knew like language was not the barrier. In fact, like because I didn't know Hindi, I kind of took advantage of it. Made it my strength, like they thought I was a bit posh, and like the teachers knew Hindi. So they knew I didn't know Hindi. The students knew that we were equals, but the teachers thought like I didn't know Hindi. So like maybe like what I'm saying is more valuable than it is, which it was not. So it didn't. I don't think that's why my advice failed. There were the problems that you encountered that was like so vast. For one, answering your question, Ronit, you don't really have and like you don't really have any authority to change anything there. You act as a consultant to the leadership, but the leadership is like 50 year, like on average 50 years old. Men who won't take like a 20-year-old's advice. So it's like Gandhi's philosophy, right? Like be the change you want to
Yeah.
see in the world. You don't like go and complain about them. You can't actually complain because the Pyramid Foundation, which runs Gandhi Fellowship, has an agreement with the government that like you're not gonna actually cause any problems in the schools. So you're just there to help, to observe, and try to influence without authority. That's another value that Gandhi Fellows are taught: influence without authority. How much can you do that? So I think it was like very useful for me when I started Swara, because Swara mostly worked with volunteers. So like most, like 90% of the work that's what has done has been through people volunteering their time. And to get people to volunteer their time, they have to find value in what they're doing. So it's not money, or like when we started, we didn't even have a brand name for them to say that I worked at Swara. So it's purely through like you have to
Yeah.
influence, and your brand has to influence them without paying anything, without any authority.
Cool.
So that was a useful
And then
lesson.
when the Gandhi Fellowship ended, uh, how did you think about what's next, and like what was that process like for you?
For me, it was pretty straightforward. I did think like, should I get a job for like maybe a few minutes when someone asked me. But I started Swara like 6 months before Gandhi Fellowship ended, and then Swara was going really well. We were going for like exhibitions outside in like Bombay. We were getting a lot of support from the local government. Suddenly they wanted us to do a project, like a really big project, and the pilot was with 300 women. So there was a lot of like things happening for Swara. It was not even like, actually it was not an option for me to stop, because we were too small for me, for anybody else to take it up. And it was going well enough for me to like dedicate full time to it. Also, I didn't want to do anything else. Like, get a job in what? Like nothing. I didn't find anything
The
interesting.
Gandhi Fellowship, and you thought that you're gonna create a lot of impact, obviously, with anybody going into this program and being put in this situation. You're like, I'm gonna create change, and that's what's
Yeah,
inspiring you. And then, like you described, you get there, and suddenly you're faced with all of these challenges
yeah,
that you couldn't have foreseen until you got there. So you're there, you're trying
yeah,
to influence these schools that you have no authority over. You're working with these extremely difficult stakeholders, and you're not being able to do a lot. So you're probably feeling really frustrated, right? Like, what did you
Yeah.
feel? Did you feel like you wanted to leave this? Did you feel like your entire idea of like being
Yes.
wanting to do impact is just like a lie and it just
Yes.
doesn't work?
100% yes. And after 1 year, so you don't get to go home that much during Gandhi Fellowship. So at the end of 1 year, there is a small break where you can go home for like, I think a week or something. I came home and I was like, I'm not going back. I'm definitely leaving. Like, I don't want the stupid certificate or anything because, like, I'm wasting my time. I'm like hitting a wall. Like, nobody wants to change anything there. The teachers don't want it, the students don't want it, the parents don't want it. They just see me as an amusement. Like, like it's fun to have you around and everyone's nice, but like I'm not doing anything with my life. And the whole point of doing Gandhi Fellowship was, you had a question before, like Gandhi Fellowship was a complete 180
Yes.
degree turn from the life I had in Bombay. I loved my friends and I loved like my life, my youth in Bombay. Like I have a tattoo of Bombay. Like that's how much I loved like those 3 years. I think personally, I had so much fun, and there was, yeah, and everybody around you have so much time, and you have so much time. It's the best thing for like immediate pleasure. Like every day is fun, but like and it's easy to just like keep doing that. But I think like I did everything I wanted to in 3 years, that I was like, this is great, to like satisfy your, yeah, what is it called? There's two types of like feeling good, right? So there is one that is like uh, give that you get from eating good food, like having fun, chilling with your friends, whatever, and something that you get from like actually working hard to get something. And I felt like I didn't have anything that I felt. I did go and teach again students in the shelter home in Bombay, and I think that's the only time I felt like I was actually feeling good in a deeper way, if that makes sense. And the other time I was just like it was so selfish. The fun I was having was so selfish, even if it was like with my friends and doing things with people, it was still just so meaningless. uh, just I would feel good about it, but like what does this all mean? So that's why I picked Gandhi Fellowship, to actually like do something with my life and my time. And I was not getting that. I did like a lot of projects in like schools to change things. Like I did some art class. I tried to like establish this art board, because a lot of the time like teachers didn't have fun coming and teaching, so they wouldn't teach because there's nobody looking if they're teaching or not. So I thought like, how do they have fun? And teachers mostly, most people love art actually. So, and these are like, how do I say it? Most of them were women, the teachers. Headmasters, for me, it was like two women and like two guys. But the teachers were mostly women, and they loved like, drawing and painting and things like that. So I thought like if you have like a established a program like this, that would actually create like a positive environment in classes. But it didn't really kick off. Everything was like, yeah, not going forward. We did an exchange program between this private school and government school, which I'm super proud of. And I think there should be more like interactions between people of like different socioeconomic backgrounds, and that at a very young age, which I think I didn't get enough of, or nobody gets
Yeah.
enough of. In India, because it's such a classist place. But I was very proud of it. But like we did one cohort, and then nobody really wanted to like pick it up. And I was like, nothing I do is meaningful here. Like everything is just me forcing it to happen, and without me, nothing's gonna happen. And I'm not gonna stay here forever running these programs. So yeah, I want to leave at the end of 1 year, but then I spoke to my sister, Ammu, my elder sister, and then I told her like I'm not staying for 1 more year and all that stuff. And then like, what am I even doing with my life? Then Ammu was like, because of you, I know what's happening in these villages and in these schools, and because of you, all your friends are getting to know about all these things which we never would have known before, like what's happening. Like it's so wild that these teachers don't teach kids. Like how can they do that? So just having somebody who has any kind of power in the world, being in these environments like you and witnessing it and telling the world about it is a huge contribution that you're making. And you should probably write more about it and talk more about it. And don't try to like change. And don't, if you don't want to do things, don't do things. So then I kind of like stopped doing things in schools. I decided to chill, and that's when I started Swara.
I feel like your sister did this tremendously powerful thing, which is she sort of reframed all the things that you were doing that in your head were characterized as failures. And she said,
Yeah,
by virtue of just being there and accepting, in Abhilaksha's words, that call to action, and then being there in itself was a success because you're there and you are
yeah,
doing that interchange of information between like two completely different worlds, like you said. Like, even though those students
yeah,
couldn't go from that school to a school in Bombay, you became that medium where you were there and you saw that life, and then you're taking insights from there and what's going on and speaking about that with your friends who have a completely different life. So you're sharing that information, and she reframed it and she made you feel like you are still creating change, right?
yeah.
That's right.
Like my time and experiences, it's meaningful. What that 1 year was meaningful.
How did you get the idea for Swara? And for those of us who haven't heard of Swara before, how do you describe Swara? By the way, like Asha, before I met you, right? Every time Priya posted an Insta story with you in it, and like I commented on those stories, I'd say something like, "Oh, this is Swara, voice of woman, women, right?" Like,
Ah, yeah,
and like because I didn't remember your name, but like I remembered that you're the Swara friend,
Swara.
right? So, well, how did
Yeah.
that start?
No, that's the biggest compliment. I love it when people call me Swara. I feel like so
Yeah.
good. I think Swara for me is an attempt to showcase the skills that women have in the most remote parts of our country. And I feel it's an attempt to show that they have power to create, like, contribute to the economy. It's a social enterprise. We are working to create income opportunities for women in villages, and we have a fashion brand, on direct to consumer fashion brand, which we market through Instagram, where we have like 26 K followers. The fashion brand is just for me like just the first step. It's a great medium to tell stories. Everybody's interested in talking about fashion, and fashion is not where I started, but it's where like we spent the past 6 years trying to like tell stories, sell clothes made by these women, and to give money back to the hands of the artisans. But it's much bigger. I think like the vision is to break the stereotype that exists around these women. They are not seen as people who can contribute to your company effective way. They can't do 9 to 5 jobs, and they have a handicap, but that's not true. They're so hardworking. So living in these villages. So coming back to what I did the second year of Gandhi Fellowship. So after that 1 year, like I was always doing things in the schools, and like my brain was completely focused on schools. And second year, when I decided to chill, I would spend a lot of time doing nothing but hanging out, like apart from the morning 8 to 2 in schools. I would spend like from 2, I would spend a lot of time with in the community, just going to the fields and sitting and talking to people. Just like I had nothing better to do, because otherwise I would be like working on my project of the month, and I wouldn't like interact that much. But because I had so much time, I would spend so much time with the community. And during village immersion, I spend a lot of time with this lady who was like the landlady of the house I stayed in, Anjana Didi, and she was so good. She was so smart, she was so intelligent, so kind, so hardworking. She would wake up at like, I don't know, 4 a.m. or something, because by the time I was awake, she was done like with, I don't know, tending to her fields, her cattle, making food for me and her kids. And yeah, she would be ready to start her day when I woke up at like 7 a.m. to get ready to go to school. So I was just like so impressed by how hard she worked. Then when I went to school, she would like be go to her in-laws' house and like take care of them, and then like again take care of her agriculture and everything. And when I came back, she was still working, and she had a small little business in her house of like grinding grain for the community. And she was also the head of the SHG, the self-help group, where women come once a week to on Wednesday and uh, collect money and have a savings account. And like they were like, I would go for those meetings also and spend a lot of time with these women. And I realized they're like super hardworking, super smart. Anjana Didi was like an archery champion in school, and she had like won a lot of competitions for in the district. And then she just like stopped doing anything anything like cool after she got married. And I felt like we were wasting so much talent. And it was not just her. The village was run by women like her, very talented, very hardworking, but they couldn't do a 9 to 5 jobs. They had other priorities. So I just felt like, I should do something because they all needed money. Like they all really needed money. Um, like there was I mean, she made food, but very little food. There was very little food. Um, house where I stayed, it was like half constructed because they didn't have money to like construct it. At least it was not a mud house, but still it was like a half constructed house. There was no proper door um, in like the bedroom or like anywhere. It was not that safe. So they really needed money, and like I thought we could do something with this, with them to give them money. And I wanted to do rural homestays because I loved hanging out in the villages, and I was like, this is such a rustic experience that people should pay for. And for village immersion, you have to go there and like convince them to host you and feed you for free. And I was like, if I had the money, and like if I was like, I don't know, a corporate person, I would love to like come and do this for like 2 days. Bose actually, Ronit's fiance, came and stayed with me, stayed with me for like a couple of days, and she really loved it. And we actually started a Instagram page to uh, start this company. And the idea was like, rural homestays run by rural women, which gives this experience of like you can wake up and milk the goat and like all those things. We started that company, and I tried to like uh, do that for like 6 months, I guess, to really like build that out. But it was too expensive to like, you had to do like build toilets there, and it had to be a chain of homestays to make any sense financially. And it was too much investment, and did not have I didn't want to like go and fundraise or anything. So started the fashion brand, kind of like to act as a marketing idea for Dungarpur as a
How did
place.
you come to fashion?
Yes.
The, yeah, I was just trying to understand. You're wearing Swara right now, right? Okay. So why blue? Why is everything you guys make blue?
Two questions. I can answer that. Coincidence. Both are like basically very logical decisions. So I really wanted to start the rural homestay. I was like in love with the idea. And I wrote to Airbnb. I went and spoke to like a lot of hostels and these places in Udaipur, which is 2 hours away, and which attracted a lot of tourists. If it is possible to start something like this in Dungarpur, if it's a good idea. And like I got a mixed reaction mainly. And also I researched a lot of like the trend in tourism. People were looking for like hidden gems and that kind of people. Zostel had just gone big, and it had proved that in India had a lot of people who wanted to come to tier 3 cities. So now the question is like, would they want to come to villages like this huge? And there was a rising trend, and I still feel like now there's a lot of like experiential tourism happening, but I still think it's there's a lot of scope for it. And at that time, I strongly believe there was scope for it, but because of resources, we couldn't do it. And but I had built out the whole business plan for it. So one big problem, like out of many challenges, one big challenge was Dungarpur is not on the map. When you Google Dungarpur, have you guys heard of Dungarpur
No,
before?
Vaguely,
I
because
don't
I
know.
live in Gujarat, so must.
Oh,
You said it was on the
that
border.
people from Gujarat come to
Or
Dungarpur to
alcohol,
drink
yeah,
because it's
yeah, yeah.
yeah, for alcohol. So
So it's right on the border. That's where I remembered it from. Yeah, like now I don't.
yeah, yeah. But that's what it's known for, like for people from Ahmedabad to come and drink alcohol. Otherwise, it's not on the map. When you Google it, there's very little content. So you had to do a lot of, if you wanted to attract people, you have to create a lot of trust around the brand, around the place. So the fashion brand idea was like, I guess, one page of our whole business plan, like a very short thing where it was like, we will start. So Dungarpur has a lot of tailors, and a lot of these women are tailors. So we'll start a fashion brand where these women make the clothes, and we'll sell it to urban consumers who we want to, like, who are our potential customers for the tourism idea. And they will and every dress will go with a card which talks about the lady who made the dress and Dungarpur, and with an invite like, oh, would you like to come to Dungarpur and meet Neelamji? She runs a homestay. So for us, the fashion brand was just a small marketing idea to create trust for people to come to Dungarpur. So it was I hadn't done any research at that time about fashion, or like what are the logistics involved or anything. It was just like, oh, we just start a fashion brand. Like, so simple. Like, I really thought it was that easy to like start a fashion brand. But I really believe that it's a good way to create trust in an urban market without spending too much money on ads or like content. And then they'll come visit. And like all these homestays will basically be like run by, because almost everyone was a tailor. So that was not a, yeah, that was a no-brainer. Like, the person who has the homestay will have a tailoring machine and they'll do the tailoring. But when we realized who we are not going forward with the tourism idea, it was like January, or like January of 2018. And then I was like, yeah, I had just almost given up, and like I had given up. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do anything with my time here. I'm going to chill for the next like 6 months. So like, might as well like try this fashion brand idea to like start marketing it, so that like one day maybe someone can do the homestays or we can do it. It's just very low touch, low effort. Let's start a fashion. Let's start working on the marketing idea. So Swara, the fashion brand is basically like a marketing idea which we just started, I guess, like um 1 month after realizing that's the only thing left to do. 6 months is too short a time to like build toilets and like then create the chain of, also raise money and then do all that. And then like, I had no plans of staying back in Dungarpur. That I was very clear about. I'm like, I love this place, but I don't speak the language. There was like, everybody was leaving. I'm not staying in Dungarpur. So I was sure about that. So that's why the rural homestays, I couldn't have done it. It's possible I could have raised money. I could have, like, I still feel very strongly about that idea. So it's not like it wasn't possible. It's just that I realized that I couldn't do it in that short time frame, and take that financial risk or anything. So the fashion brand was a very like, yeah, let's just do it. And then I started researching on what it takes to like start a fashion brand. And then I realized it's like a whole thing. And I've been working on it for 6 years now, still trying to figure out does all this work. Because it was at blue. Why we picked blue is but during the research, it was clear that you couldn't start a fashion brand that was not environmentally conscious, because the whole world is going that way, and not many people were doing it in India, like environmentally conscious, ethical fashion at an affordable price point. So we were like, okay, that's the niche that we'll work in to cater to that audience, because Yeah, and I worked in an NGO. People around me had very little salary to spend on clothes, but they were all conscious, and it was not a big conversation, sustainable fashion at that time, but they would clearly like talk about how like yeah, fashion. Yeah, you guys probably know like Gandhi Fellows are very like activisty about
Yeah,
everything. So people would talk about it, but not they didn't have another option like what to buy if not this. Like sustainable fashion was like at a price point of 8,000 for a top, and like that's the whole salary we got, like more than our 1 month salary stipend we got as Gandhi Fellows. So it was more like the environment bit, sustainable fashion. Environmentally sustainable fashion was just like a strategic advantage, and I was like, no business is going to survive in the future without this. So, and while Googling how to create environmentally sustainable products, the dye is an issue. It has to be like natural dye, and like hand printed would be better than like you're not using machines to print your clothes, all that stuff. So on, we went to Dungarpur one Saturday because Saturday Sunday is off for Gandhi Fellows, no school. So we went to Udaipur and just went to a lot of stores asking like where we could get sustainable fashion, sustainable fabrics. And then someone said like Akola. There's this village called Akola, like 1.5 hours from here. There, the whole village does printing, and like this is their signature thing that they do, like Dabo printing, and it was established by a king in Udaipur, like more than a century ago, and now everyone does it, and they do it for Fabin and all these places that have Source Indigo stuff. So just a strategic decision. We stuck to it because every year everyone asks this, and I'm like, it's a very big way for us to announce that we are going bigger by introducing new colors. So we should only do that when we are ready to like, you know, take advantage of that announcement. So that's why we just stuck to
So
Indigo.
something that I was just wondering, right, is when I think about, like, when I hear you talk about the entire journey of how to set up a fashion brand and making that decision, and then thinking through all of these nuances that it has to be environmentally sustainable, right? We've got to have a supplier that is able to provide us with the right fabric, and I'm sure there's a lot of things you haven't talked about as well, right? Like how to set up the entire tailoring production processes,
Yeah,
make them
yeah.
efficient, so on. um, right now I'm currently working with a friend of mine, Prabhakar, to um, so we're building an app, right? And the idea of that app and everything about that app have come into extreme scrutiny from anybody we have told, or like from a lot of people that we have spoken to about it, right? And typically you hear things like, you're not ready, you need more experience, you have never built an app before, or nobody's going to give you money, nobody's going to pay you for what you are creating, so why even waste your time? You should do something else, like, I don't know, focus on this one idea that I think is going to be big because I know better than you, and so on. So I was just wondering, like, did you have like a lot of people trying to tell you not to do it and telling you this is a garbage idea or whatever, right? Like just naysayers, and how did you deal with that? I was just saying, even if it was your own self that was coming in your way, like what was that struggle like?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. So now we are going through a transition. Like we are trying to figure out like what is it's hard to scale up the business model we have beyond a point, and I want to do something that impacts a lot of people, and we are now figuring out a new idea for Swara, like how do we grow, and like maybe a new business model like as a side thing, maybe working with more artisans in a different model. But now, with like 6 years of work experience in the fashion industry and an MBA, and just not smarter friends, but like more experienced friends that vet this idea with, the questions you get asked and like your level of self doubt is so much more. I think like being inexperienced is the best thing for an entrepreneur. Like, I had no idea about like anything in fashion. We figured out our supplier by going and talking to shops. It was like what my dad would have done like 40 years back to set up his business, and that's how I set up Swara, and that was the best thing we did. like 1 year into this, and I watched like TED Talks and things like that. Content I consumed was very not practical. It was just a lot of inspiration about like the ideal world, and even this environmentally conscious piece. Like, yeah, all the thing I now, having had the MBA and done having done all these projects. Now for the new business model, I read like content I consume. It is so rooted in reality. It's just so much more to fight with the practical stuff out there. But back then, nothing practical. Like only TED talks about like cultural sustainability was a big pillar when we started. Like, how do we preserve the culture of the artisans we are interacting with? Like, and it's so good to like build from from a place of like no knowledge and no practical information, and only consumed then from optimists who are talking about like what an ideal world looks like. So you build that into your like your core business model, and I think that is a best advantage. And I don't know how to undo everything that I've learned, because you can't be like, okay, I know this is a I should like go back to how I started Swara, and I should approach this with that level of like, yeah, just enthusiasm and optimism. But like, I don't have any tips for you. I just like how I was then and how I am now. But I totally
I
get you.
think that's a great tip. The fact that you need to be a little bit childish, and I would even say a little bit deluded when you're trying to do
Yeah,
something new or do anything rather, because you're often, and I feel like I look back as a kid, and again, going back to that same question of what you wanted to be when you grow up, I would say things like, I want to be an astronaut. When I ask my friends these questions, they say, like, I want to be a firefighter by the morning and a footballer by the night. And just absolutely out of the world answers. And as you grow up,
yeah,
and like you said, as you become more experienced and as you become more knowledgeable, you also become more of a realist, and then your approach and your
yeah,
dreams
yeah,
and your, like, it gets hindered. Like, you just realize that with that experience you can do less, and that is limiting, and that I feel like
yeah,
that shouldn't be the way it is. So your tip of the fact that what pretty much led you to build this ethical, environmentally friendly, sustainable brand in Dungalpur is the fact that you were inspired by watching TED Talks that told you that there is a bigger vision and you can just go ahead and chase it. And then you
yeah,
worked backwards from that inspired vision and added like steps of like realism to it, being like, oh, like,
yeah.
yeah, like I'll just go to.
We need cloth.
Exactly. I need to get cloth, like, to build this bigger vision. So I'll just go get cloth from somewhere. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and then figure out what to get next. Yeah, that's very apt. One second about the TED Talk. I'll tell you one thing. Don't talk to people who did the TED Talk. So I watched one TED Talk and I was so like psyched about this idea that they had about like including something in fashion. Like fashion is going so wrong, and like big thing about history of fashion, and then the how the future should be. I was like, oh my God, I'm totally incorporating this into our business plan. And then I scheduled a call. I got in touch with this person who did the TED Talk, and I had a call with them. And I was like, oh my God, this is such a great idea. How is it going? Your work in it? She's like, no, I don't work in it. Like, it's very difficult to like actually do this in practice. And like my whole image just like, I was like, what are you talking about? I'm doing it. Like what you talked about. But like, I think everyone become real while you're like doing the action, but being like naive and that lady was like, I don't know, 10 years into this, and she was at a different point in her career, in her journey as an entrepreneur or whatever, and I wasn't. And I think like, yeah, it's important to just take the content and not be too realistic when you start. But scaling up, I think like once you start, you need optimism and like all these things to start. But I think like to scale up and to actually build something that can last forever. You need to have all these other skills of being practical, analytical, and all these things, but without losing the optimism of like what you're built. So it's I think I'm really good at starting, but I'm still figuring out like I'm still developing those skills for that scale up journey which we are in now.
That's very interesting. I feel like throughout your entire journey of building Swara, you've probably, and being in the Gandhi Fellowship, and even before that, while being in Bombay and living your hip life, you felt a lot of things. And I feel like we do things or stick to doing things not necessarily because that they give us a great outcome. That might be a part of it. But we also end up doing things because of the way that they make us feel while we're doing it. So, what did you feel while you were building Swara at different stages? Like, how did it make you feel during the journey at different points?
When I started, it was just like I was so excited. I barely slept. I just felt like there was so much to do, and every small thing we did, I felt like a sense of huge achievement. Like the first photo shoot we did, the first post we posted, and I think that high like took me forward for the whole 1 year, I would say. Just like the sheer like basics, and it was so basic. Like the things we did now in retrospect, like it's not rocket science, and it was very practical and very like intuitive. I guess starting a fashion brand, I think it's like the simplest thing, and everyone should start a fashion brand, an ethical, sustainable fashion brand. And I think a lot of people in India are doing that now, which is amazing. And then after like 1 year, um, I think it became a bit more challenging. I think like we started some challenges we just couldn't solve with sheer optimism and intuition or like reading up enough. It required like more strategic. It just got more complicated, just like math, I think. Like I used to love math in school, and then I went to college and I was like, oh my God, this is like, I didn't know math had so many letters. So I think just like that, the 1 year I was just so in love with like building, and the second year I realized like I have to upskill myself to like deal with
Yeah.
these problems. And the whole volunteer model is probably not that effective, getting really smart people to come and solve it, but like you need people to stay on and build systems. So I think second year I just had to grow up and like introspect a lot more and go beyond just optimism. um Second, third year, I think it was still that, just like fighting and like being more. It really forces you to grow up, I think. It does like really force you to improve it forced me to improve myself and really like introspect at what you're doing wrong as a founder, what I was doing wrong as a founder, because at the end of the day, no matter who is there or what is going on, like if the ball is in your court. Is that right analogy? So at the end of the day, you whatever is going on, it's on you. Like it is your decision what to do with it. You can ask for help and people can help or give money or like give their time and skills, all that stuff. But like you need to make some decisions. And that's kind of like what led me to apply for the MBA and go for it. Just that understanding that I need to upskill myself for Swara to grow. And like no matter what else I do or other people do for me or how much they love it and they think that MBA is not the right decision and that you should keep building. I know that like it looks really great from outside and that it looks like I've done a lot. It did look like that, like to people who are observing that, oh, I'd built something from scratch with no experience in fashion or business or work experience. Yeah, I was so young. It was super impressive from outside, but like I knew that how much I had done and how much there was left to do, and that like I was the bottleneck. So for me, it made like complete sense not to listen to anyone and go do the MBA. I don't think MBA is like the right decision for everyone, and I think it could have or anyone. No, it's the right decision for some people, but I just knew I had to upskill myself, and MBA is just one way to that I thought I could do it, but like I could have done it by working with someone else. There's so many other ways to do it. But I also knew that like the vision I had for myself and for my brand, I needed like something like Oxford. I wanted a brand like Oxford to support me to reach there. Not in the next 10 years, like in the next like 40 years of my life. This is something I wanted to have as like another, because a lot of people respect brands and you
Yeah.
can't avoid that. And I only realized that like once I started like being in these circles, and I was like, you just, yeah, you just can't crack some people or like some things with just hard work and sheer optimism, or like it's just a advantage. Yeah, for some things, Oxford does open doors to everywhere in the world.
When you were transitioning away from Swara and thinking about what's next, right? Like with the MBA and with upskilling yourself, did that feel like a very radical shift from a very optimistic point of view
Yeah.
to like a more cold and practical state of being? And was that difficult? And how did you feel while that was going on?
Yeah, so it was not a quick decision to upskill myself or to do something different for a bit. Um, I didn't know if that I had to take a complete break and do something for a year. The MBA kind of, yeah, I made the decision to apply for the MBA a few months before actually applying, but I was going through this period after that, the first year of like completely going through it based on optimism, then scaling it up. I knew that like I had to do something to upskill myself. I did consider maybe doing a job or like getting a co-founder on board who can fix that gap in me. But when I decided MBA was the right way to go, then it was a lot of like guilt of not going through with this and doing this, forcing not forcing myself, but so many people build companies without taking a break and scale up and like do whatever it takes. I did feel kind of um, like I was giving up and kind of like a loser because I didn't think it was a very brave decision in the for a while. But then I thought about it like this is a very long journey. I'm not here to build a startup and to leave. I was here for like a mission, and I thought about it, uh, not thought about it. I still think about it as like my life's work and like what I'm gonna be doing forever. No, like I don't think about like retiring from this. So when I thought about it from like a very long term perspective, the 1 year did not seem like a very big break. It just seemed like something I had to do and something that will help me get where I want to get in my life, like with this mission. So I think um, yeah, kind of reconciled with all these like different thoughts I had. But yeah, it was not easy, and it is still not easy. I don't know what could have happened if I didn't. I wonder sometimes like, oh, Swara might have, I might have been able to scale it up much more easily if I hadn't done the MBA. But it was also because I didn't choose to build a fashion brand, and by like the second and third year, it became all about fashion. And when like the business model we had was like working with women artisans, but giving them consignments of work and then like in getting that inventory and then selling that inventory. And when you have more inventory than what you're selling, then your focus will become on how do I sell more, and then it becomes less about impact. And then I at some point I was like, what am I even doing with my, like, this is not what I wanted to do, and this is really not what drove me to business. Impact drove me to business, not just business, and not a fashion brand. So yeah, I kind of reconcile with myself that this is, and even now I uh, am in that process of understanding that fashion is not the business I want to run. the business I want to run is, which creates most impact. So, so yeah, I was okay with that after a while,
That's
after
really
the decision
interesting.
to do an MBA.
Yeah, because I think what that reminds me of is the idea that sometimes the dreams we start out with evolve, and the essence that is like deep within them is what we keep with us when we move on to the next thing. So something that I really wanted to do as a 22-year-old, for example, is I wanted a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right? So at the time, India had like one guy who was like a certified instructor. He was a purple belt at the time, and it takes 6 years of training under somebody who can trace their lineage back to the guys that invented this martial art in Brazil,
Yeah.
to be able to get a purple belt. So at the time, there was like one guy in the country who had a purple belt, and it took him 6 years to get it, right?
Yeah.
And I was 21 at the time, and I spoke to him about this. I said, it's I want to become a black belt, and um, do you think it's possible for me to do with like a full-time job and shit like that? And he was like, how old are you? And I was like 21, and he just did a double take. He's like, I was 27 when I started, and in like 2 years from now you'll be a beast. You just have to like be consistent and just keep coming back, and then eventually it'll happen one day. And then like some shit happened to me which made it impossible for me to keep going to class, and like I moved out of the city, and like they didn't have suitable instruction in other places that I went to, and that sort of fell by the wayside, right? And it's been like 6 years since I went to my last jiu-jitsu class. But I guess like the things that attracted me to that dream, right, of becoming like a black belt in this martial art, were maybe more about like a sense of physical discipline, that there is something that you are dedicated to, which reflects in how you use your body and how you present and things like that. And now it's shifted a lot to the gym, right, which is more accessible, and like it's something that I can get in any city in the world, but it's also something I found great passion in. So at that time I used to like watch all sorts of videos about jiu-jitsu, but now it's like videos about how to do a whatever, like a tricep push down properly or something like that, right? But um like it's like I love how fashion is like a vehicle for impact for you, but impact is impact. So even if like you want to abandon or you have to leave behind one thing that you did or you wanted to achieve, part of that stays on in like the next thing you go for, right? But
It's like pursuing the underlying motivation of the journey, or the dream, instead of making the dream what you want to pursue, because every now and then you have to keep changing like the path, or like the overarching like thing that you're doing. But with Swara, like you said from the beginning, it was about creating impact, or it was about bringing more of Dungarpur and these people to the world, to show to the world that like there is this place where there are these beautiful people and they are capable of doing things. And that was there when you were at the Gandhi Fellowship trying to create that exchange program with school students, right? To take them to like different schools. The underlying motivation was to bring more of Dungarpur to the world. It was there when you, I think, tried to think of creating that rural homestay where you wanted to get people from everywhere else and bring them to Dungarpur. Like same motivation, and the same with the fashion brand. Now that it's gone beyond India, with you moving from India to Oxford, like to the UK, and going to Oxford, like you're bringing more of the world to the world. So, like pursuing, I feel like in your entire journey, you've just stayed consistent with pursuing that underlying motivation of bringing the world to the world. So, where do you want to take this motivation next? What's the next big picture?
also, did Antler sort of fit within that? And yeah, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good questions. I'll share a bit about like what happened after the MBA. So the whole 1 year of the MBA was about bringing not just Dungarpur, just like India is so big and so beautiful and multicultural, and we have so much to offer, and our women have so much to offer. And it was even I realized like I love Kerala, and told you about how like the income inequality is so much lesser than what I saw in Dungarpur or Bombay or anywhere. It's still a very small town, and it's not on the map either. There's not that much content about Etamanur, the town I come from. So I make it a point to introduce Etamanur when I introduce myself. And like I get like people reach out to me who are from Etamanur, like saying like, "Oh, you're from Etamanur, and now you're in Oxford." It's a sense of like I feel very a lot of pride in where I come from, and like my story I realize is also like a story about bridging like these places, and it's my mission to like kind of speak for all these small places which are not on the map. Um, so we actually did the first fashion show at the Oxford Union, which is not at all known for fashion shows. So we were one of the first, one of the four brands who did like the first fashion show, and we all the models were wearing these handcrafted products made in these villages in India on this like global stage, and we got so much love and appreciation for it. So my whole year of the MBA was about like bringing like the hidden places and showcasing the talent that is in these women and in these small places in India. So after the MBA, I came back to India to kind of grow Swara, and I spent like a few months doing that, and realized that when we started, there were so few direct to consumer brands in India on Instagram. That was our first platform where we grew. Um, and all these brands had like similar values as Swara, like ethically made, environmentally sustainable, beautiful storytelling. Everyone has a card that tells you about who made the clothes. So I'm so happy with that, like with the with this huge like MSME market that has been created in India in the past like 2.5 years, I would say, or 2 to 3 years since COVID. And like a lot of people who worked with me at Swara volunteered, intern. A lot of them started their own fashion brands. So I'm very proud of that. But that also kind of made me realize like the mission we started with has is being taken forward by a lot of other people. So like what are we doing now? Should we scale the same model and compete with the market which is so saturated now, or should we do is this our opportunity to step back and think of like what we can do next as a brand? As a brand, we are actually on the same path of like giving more work to artisans, same business model, but I took a step back to kind of see if I can come up with a new business model, something tech related. So that's why I applied to Antler, kind of to understand what's happening in this like hyper growth startup area and if there is a space for impact there. So I applied for Antler in London because I had applied while I was still in London, and I heard back from them when I was asking these questions, and I got through for the program here last year. So I came here with the idea of like doing something in ethical fashion, something in women empowerment. And in the end, I found a co-founder who was also interested in uh, financial empowerment for women. And we worked on an idea of getting like financial education and like knowledge about investing and the tools in the hands of all the women who don't, because women invest much less than men do. That means they grow their wealth, they take less risk, they're conservative, and that means they grow their wealth less than men do. And that just increases the income inequality and financial freedom women can enjoy. So I worked on that for a few months, realized that like impact is really hard to sell to a VC. And also like it's a space that like yeah, I saw it and I'm happy with all the things I've learned from it, but growing like a hyper growth startup backed by a VC is not really where I want to go. So did Antler was Antler helpful in me deciding what I don't want to do and what are the things I want to do? For sure.
I think Asha, speaking to you for the last 1 hour, I've realized that you've proven like the art of the possible using Swara in many ways. Like you said that you started this ethical fashion brand that was one of the initial ones to start in India, and now there's this really crowded, really like growing space in India of like a lot of ethical fashion brands starting, and that's catering to like the Indian market. And that in some way, maybe some of those brands saw what Swara was doing and decided to do it. Maybe they did it better than Swara. But at the end of the day, it's the fact that they saw Swara or they learned about ethical fashion because it became a thing because somebody else did it before them. And they thought that this is pretty cool. We should do it as well. Like, we should emulate it. So, like, the idea of creating impact, whether you're doing it by yourself through your own, like, vehicle, which is Swara, or whether you're setting an example using that vehicle, even though that vehicle is not good, even though that vehicle is not doing it directly, which is you're not growing it like you said, you don't want to grow it like a hyper growth VC funded startup. It's setting an example and it's showing other brands, other people that A, you can buy ethical fashion at a decent price point, and B, that people can actually go ahead and start these brands and it'll actually work. So, I mean, my reflection from this entire conversation is Swara and you sort of paved the way for, in some way, or showed an example of there is a path here and it can be emulated and it should be emulated and it can be done by like someone who had a very common journey, like came from a town in Kerala, went to a big city for university, had a really fun college life, and then realized that yeah, you can do something more with your life when you want to create impact. Face those challenges and realize that impact is not easy. It's like a small word, but it takes a lot out of you when you're trying to actually create impact. What do you think of that?
I think I like to think of my favorite entrepreneurs and like people in my lives as rock stars in a way, right? And what that means is if you read the stories of any world famous guitar player, for example, and guitar players, because I am obsessed with guitar players, I play guitar. I've been doing it since I was 13, but what I like to do is read through their Wikipedia articles, right? Where were they born? How did they pick up the instrument? And like, how did they get good? When was their first show, right? And it always seems like they all come from like these random places in Texas or Alabama or wherever, right? And they start performing at school talent shows or something like that, and suddenly they're performing in bars and then they're touring the countryside. And for a very long time in that story it feels like this isn't going to go anywhere, right? Like,
Yeah.
or they it's like they haven't like gone to somebody and asked them, bro, what's the right thing to do right now? Can I become a world famous guitarist? Should I convert this into like a full time career, right? Like, should I be doing other things? For example, like James Hetfield is Metallica's guitar player, and Metallica is like one of the biggest bands on the planet,
Yeah.
and has been for like 30 years, right? And there's this interview where he was talking about how he started, how he decided to stick with Metallica, right? And it's like I had two choices. Like it was either go to three choices actually. I could play American football, but I had long hair and my coach wanted me to cut it, and that's not something I wanted to do. The other option, yeah, right. And the other thing was he could go work at a factory, and it would pay well, and like he'd get married and have kids, and it would be a decent life. Or he could go and like go play like guitar every night, right? And uh, that was something that gave him joy and something that he
Yeah.
genuinely believed was like what Asha said, right? His life's work could have started there, which is enrich millions of lives with this one thing that he really cares about. And it's like there's no manual for it.
Yeah.
right? It
And
wasn't
he
the practical
definitely didn't
decision.
know that it's going to touch millions of lives or last this long.
I mean, look at me, right? I grew up in Gujarat and I have heard most of his songs, right? I idolize this person and take inspiration from his life. To me, Asha's journey is very similar sounding, right? Which is that the only consistent theme is it's almost like a fuck it, let's do it,
Yeah,
right? I want to do this. Let's do this. Let's figure out a way to do it, right? It's not, there's no like overthinking, or maybe at least it's not visible to me in the way that you present yourself, Asha, and like the way you tell the story. It just feels like it's a lot of let's do it,
yeah,
like action, 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 right? And we'll see where this goes. And ultimately, that's what I want from this podcast. And that's what I think people's biggest takeaway should be, which is nothing matters other than doing the thing, right?
100%.
um, and knowing why you want to do it, and that's just it. Like, just go for it. Like,
Yeah,
you know, and every part of your journey just reinforces that to me, right?
yeah.
Which is like, it's fine. You don't need to. Um, it'll evolve in the worst case, right? Like, but
Yeah,
it'll never be the wrong thing to do, to act.
100%. To act is never the wrong thing. I said mentioned right, like Swara is. I started Swara 6 months before the fellowship started, and it was kind of like the one I had least conviction about and passion towards. But I still did it, and I did it like with a lot of like heart and like a lot of push. And there are like I mentioned like two, three projects I did before, like the tourism thing. But there are like I don't know, like probably like 30 projects that I started during the fellowship, and they all like failed. But I had so much fun and so much learning from each thing. And Swara, I wouldn't say was like it was a success, or it was like it got recognition and was kind of a success, not because of me alone. It was like the environment and like the people. It resonated with the target audience. It was the timing was right. Instagram was right. We had we did the right messaging. We had the right tailors who supported us. There was like hundreds of things that worked out for it to kind of become a success. It was not at all because I decided to act. But if I didn't act, then it never would have happened. So I'm like very biased towards action. Also, I'm very impulsive and like I have a bit of like ADHD. Like I got a lot of time to think during the MBA, and this is what I've concluded. It's just yeah, a nature thing more than like oh, I'm such an optimistic and action oriented person. It's more like I'm impulsive and impatient.
Yeah, that just reminded me of my New Year's resolution for 2022,
Mm.
which was be more stupid. Like,
Thank you, Labs.
just yeah, just, just,
I think
just
this
like do
is a great
stuff.
thing
Yeah.
because it takes you back to being a little kid, being like, I want to be an astronaut and a firefighter and a footballer. And you
Yes, you should
can.
be.
You can.
You can, 100%.
Or you can try doing it. And even if you probably don't do it, you get the entire world closer to doing that in some
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or you'll do it and realize like not working out, and but then you'll never look back and be like, or you'll never have it in your head, I want to do it, or like I don't know, just it'll be done. We can move on to the next thing.
exactly. But Asha, thanks for that. We want to ask one last question to finish this off. What inspires you today, and how can we take some of that?
Okay. What inspires me today? I'm not sure how you can take some of it, but I think I've been blessed to have a lot of diverse experiences. Having gone from like where I was born in Etumanur in Kerala to study in Bombay, then to work very closely with the grassroots in villages in North India, and then I got to study at Oxford. I think these are very different experiences, and I think the combination of all of this puts me at a unique position, which comes with a lot of responsibility. And I think what inspires me is that responsibility that I have to give back and make sure that everything I've been blessed, all the experiences that I've been blessed to have, um, leads to something bigger. I hope that like my story will inspire people to either go wherever they are born. It inspires them to take any of these routes, um, and to make something of themselves. That's what inspires me, and it also gives me like I feel responsible to make something of it.
Great.
Yeah.
Amazing. Asha Scaria, thanks so much. It was awesome chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And I can't wait to hear like all the podcasts you're gonna do. And thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for having us, like letting us have you. Okay, all right, cool.